Hello there. Thank you for clicking on this video. Your time is valuable, so we are super grateful that you are giving our little channel a chance. Any feedback is appreciated. Enjoy the story.
Gulliver's Travels into Several Remote Nations of the World by Jonathan Swift. Part 1, A Voyage to Lilliput. Chapter 3. The author diverts to the emperor and his nobility of both sexes in a very uncommon manner. The diversion of the court of Lilliput described. The author has his liberty granted him upon certain conditions. My gentleness and good behavior had gained so far on the emperor and his court, and indeed upon the army and the people in general, that I began to conceive hopes of getting my liberty in a short time. I took all possible methods to cultivate his favorable disposition. The natives came, by degree, to be less apprehensive of any danger from me. I would sometimes lie down, and let 5 or 6 of them dancing on my hand, and at last the boys and girls would venture to come and play at hide-and-seek in my hair. I had now made a good progress in understanding and speaking the language. The emperor had a mind one day to entertain me with several of the court shows, wherein they exceed all nation I know, both of dexterity and magnificence. I was diverted with none so much as that of the rope dancers, performed upon a slender wheat thread, extended about 2 feet and 12 inches from the ground, upon which I show desire liberty with the reader's patience to enlarge a little. The diversion is only practiced by those persons who are candidates for great employment and high favor at court. They are trained in this art from their youth, and are not always of noble birth or liberal education. When a great office is vacant, either by death or disgrace, which often happens, 5 or 6 of those candidates petition the emperor to entertain his majesty and the court with dance on the rope, and whoever jumps the highest without falling succeeds in the office. Very often the chief ministers themselves are commanded to show their skills, and to conceive the emperor that they have not lost their faculty. Flipnap, the treasurer, is allowed to cut a cape on the straight rope, at least an inch higher than any other lord in the whole empire. I have seen him to do the somerset several times together, upon a trencher fixed on a rope which is no thicker than a common pack thread in England. My friend Redder Russell, principal secretary for private affairs, is, in my opinion, if I am not partial, the second after the treasurer. The rest of the great officers are much upon a par. These diversions are often attended with fatal accidents, whereof a great numbers are on record. I myself have seen 2 or 3 candidates break a limb, but the danger is much greater when the ministers themselves are commanded to show their dexterity, for, by the contending to excel themselves and their flaws, they strain so far that there is hardly one of them who has not received a fall, and some of them 2 or 3. I was assured that, a year or 2 before my arrival, Flipnap would infallibly have broke his neck if one of the king's cushions that accidentally lay on the ground had not weakened the force of his fall. There is likewise another diversion, which is only shown before the emperor and the empress and the first minister upon particular occasions. The emperor lays on the table 3 fine silken threads of 6 inches long. One is blue, the other red, and the third green. These threads are proposed as prizes for those persons whom the emperor has in mind to distinguish by a particular mark of his behavior. The ceremony is performed in His Majesty's Great Chamber of State, where the candidates are to undergo a trial of dexterity very different from the former, and such as I have not observed the least resemblance of any other country or the old world. The emperor holds a stick in his hand, both ends parallel to the horizon, while the candidates advancing one by one sometimes leap over the stick, sometimes creep under it backwards and forwards, several times according as the stick is advanced or depressed. Sometimes the emperor holds one end of the stick and his first minister to the other, sometimes the minister has it entirely to himself. Whoever performed his part with most agility and holds out the longest in the leaping and creeping is rewarded with a blue-colored silk. The red is given to the next, and the green to the third, where they all wear girt twice around about the middle. And you see few great persons about this court who are not adorned with one with these girdles. The horses of the army and those of the royal stables have been daily led before me, were no longer shy, but would come up to my very feet without starting. The riders would leap them over my hand as I held it on the ground, and one of the emperor's huntsmen upon a large course took my foot, shoe and all, which was indeed a prodigious leap. I had the good fortune to divert the emperor one day after a very extraordinary manner. I desired he would order several sticks of 2 feet high and the thickness of an ordinary cane to be brought me, whereupon his majesty commanded the master of his woods to give direction accordingly. And the next morning 6 woodmen arrived with as many carriages, drawn by 8 horses to each. I took 9 of these sticks and fixed them firmly in the ground in a quadrangular figure, 2 feet and a half square. I took 4 other sticks and tied them parallel at each corner, about 2 feet from the ground. Then I fastened my handkerchief to the 9 sticks that stood erected, and extended it on all sides, till it was tied at the top of a drum, and the 4 parallel sticks, raising above 5 inches higher than the handkerchief, served as ledges on each side. When I had finished my work, I desired the emperor to let a troop of his best horses, 24 in number, came and exercise upon this plain. His majesty approved of the proposal, and I took them up one by one in my hand, ready mounted and armed, with the proper officers to exercise them. As soon as they got into order, they divided into 2 parties, performed mock skirmishes, discharged blunt arrows, drew their swords, fled and pursued, attacked and retired. In short, discovered the best military discipline I ever beheld. The parallel sticks secured them and their horses from falling over the stage, and the emperor was so much delighted that he ordered this entertainment to be repeated several days, and once was pleased to be lifted up and give the sort of a command, and with great difficulty persuaded even the empress herself to let me hold her in her close chair with 2 yards of the stage, when she was able to take a full view of the whole performance. It was my good fortune that no ill accidents happened in these entertainments. Only once a fairy horse that belonged to one of the captains peeled with his hood, stuck a hole in my handkerchief, and, his foot slipping, he overthrew his rider and himself. But I immediately relieved them both and covered the hole with my hand. I set down the troop with the other in the same manner as I took them up. The horse that fell was strained in the left shoulder, but the rider got no hurt, and I repaired my handkerchief as well as I could. However, I would not trust the strength of it any more in such dangerous enterprises. About 2 or 3 days before I was set at liberty, as I was entertaining the court with this kind of feat, there arrived an express to inform his majesty that some of his subjects, riding near the place where I was first taken up, had seen a great black substance lying on the ground, very odd-shaped, extending its edges round, as wide as his majesty's bedchamber, and rising up in the middle as high as man. That was no living creature, as they at first apprehended, for it lay on the grass without motion, and some of them had walked around it several times. That by mounting upon each other's shoulders they had got to the top, which was flat and even, and stumbling upon it, they found that it was hollow within, and that they humble conceived it might be something belonging to the man mountain, and, if his majesty pleased, they would undertake to bring it with only 5 horses. I presently knew what they meant, and was glad at heart to receive this intelligence. It seems, upon my first reaching to the shore, after our shipwreck, I was in such confusion that, before I came to the place where I went to sleep, my hat, which had fastened with a string to my head while I was rowing, and had stuck on all the time I was swimming, fell after I came to land. The string, as I conjure, breaking by some accident which I never observed, but thought my head had been lost at sea. I entreated His Imperial Majesty to give orders it might be brought to me as soon as possible, describing to him the use and the nature of it. And the next day the wagoners arrived with it, but not in a very good condition. They had bored 2 holes in the brim, within an inch and a half of the edge, and fastened 2 hooks in the holes. These hooks were tied by a long cord of the harness, and thrust my head was dragged along for above half an English mile. But the ground in that country being extremely smooth and level, it received less damage than I expected. 2 days after this adventure, the emperor having ordered that part of his army, which quarters in and about his metropolis, to be in readiness, took a fancy of diverting himself in a very singular manner. He desired I would stand like a colossus, as my legs are far asunder as I conveniently could. Then he commanded his general, who was an old experienced leader and great patron of mine, to draw up the troops in closer order and march them under me. The foot by 24 abreast, and the horses by 16, with drummers beating, colours flying, and pikes advanced. The body consisted of 3,000 foot and 1,000 horses. His Majesty gave orders upon pain of death that very soldier in his march should observe the strictest decency with regard to my person, which, however, could not prevent some of the younger officers from turning up their eyes as they passed under me. And, to confess the truth, my breeches were at that time in so ill a condition that they afforded some opportunities for laughter and admiration. I had sent so many memorials and petitions for my liberty that His Majesty at length mentioned the matter, first in the cabinet and then in a full council, where it was opposed by none, except Skyresh Bogulam, who was pleased, without any provocation, to be my mortal enemy. But it was carried against him by the whole board and confirmed by the emperor. That minister was Galbet, or admiral of the realm, very much in his master's confidence, and a person well versed in affairs, but of morose and sore complexion. However, he was at length persuaded to comply, but previewed that the articles and conditions upon which I should be set free, and to which I must swear, should be drawn up by myself. These articles were brought to me by the Skyresh Bogram, in person attending by 2 under-secretaries and several persons of distinction. After they were read, I was demanded to swear to the performance of them, first in the manner of my own country, and afterwards in the method prescribed by their law, which was to hold my right foot in my left hand, and to place the middle finger of my right hand at the crown of my head, and my thumb on the tip of my right ear. But because the readers may be curious to have some idea of the style and manner of expression peculiar to that people, as well as to know the article upon which I recover my liberty, I have made a translation of the whole instrument, word for word, as near as I was able, which I here offer to the public. Gobustru memorial avlam Gardilo shiften muli early gu, most mighty emperor of Lilliput, the light and terror of the universe, whose domination extends 5,000 blustrocks, about 12 miles in the circumference, to the extremity of the globe, monarch of all monarchs, taller than the sons of men, whose feet press down to the center, and whose head strikes against the sun, at whose nod the prince of the earth shakes their knees, pleasant as the spring, comfortable as the summer, fruitful as autumn, dreadful as winter, his most sublime majesty proposes to the man mountain, lately arrived at our celestial dominion, the following articles, which by solemn oath he shall be obligated to perform. First, the man mountain should not depart from our domains without our license under our great seal. Second, he shall not pressure to come into our metropolis without our express order, at which time the inhabitant shall have 2 hours warning, to keep within doors. Third, the said man mountain shall confine his walks to our principal high roads, and not offer to walk or lay down in the meadows or field corn. Fourth, as he walks the said roads, he shall take the utmost care not to be trampled upon the bodies of any of our loving subjects, their horses or carriages, nor taking any of our subjects into his hand without their own consent. If an express requires extraordinary dispatch, the man mountain shall be obliged to carry in his pocket the messenger and the horse a 6-day journey once in very moon, and return the said messenger back, if so required, safe to our imperial presence. Sixth, he shall be our ally against our enemies in the island of Blefuscu, and to his utmost to destroy their fleet, which is now preparing to invade us. 7. That the said man mountain shall, at his time of leisure, be aiding and assisting of our workmen in helping to raise certain great stones towards covering the walls of the principal parks and other our royal buildings. 8. That the said man mountain shall in 2 months' time deliver an exact survey of the circumference of our domain by a computation of his own piece around the coast. Lastly, that, upon his seldom ought to observe all the above articles, the said man mountain shall have a daily allowance of meat and drink sufficient for the support of 1,724 of our subjects, with free access to our royal person and other marks of our favor, given at our palace at Beltfaburak, the 12th day of the 91st moon of our reign. I swore and subscribed to these articles with great cheerfulness and content, although some of them were not so honourable as I could have wished, which proceeded wholly from the malice of Skyrish Boglum, the High Admiral, whereupon my chains were immediately unlocked, and I was at full liberty. The Emperor himself, in person, did me the honour to be by at the whole ceremony. I made my acknowledgment by prostrating myself at His Majesty's feet, but he commanded me to rise, and after many gracious expressions, which, to avoid the century of vanity, I shall not repeat, he added, that he hoped I should prove a useful servant, as well deserved of all the favours he had already conferred upon me, or might do for the future. The reader may please to observe that, in the last article of the recovery of my liberty, the Emperor stipulated to allow me a quantity of meat and drink sufficient for the support of 1,724 Lilliputians. Some time after, asking a friend of court how they came to the fixed on that determined number, he told me that His Majesty's mathematicians, having taken the weight of my body by the help of quadrant, and finding it to exceed theirs in the proportion of 12 to 1, they concluded, from the similarity of their bodies, that mine must contain at least 1,724 of theirs, and consequently would require as much food as was necessary to support that number of Lilliputians, by which the readers may conceive an idea of the ingenuity of that people, as well as the prudent and exact economics of the great prince. Chapter 4. Mildendo, the metropolis of Lilliput, described, together with the Emperor Palace, a conversation between the author and the principal secretary concerning the affairs of the Emperor. The author offers to serve the Emperor in his war. The first request I made, after I had obtained my liberty, was that I might have license to see Mildendo, the metropolis, which the Emperor easily granted me, but with a special charge to do no hurt either to the inhabitants or their houses. The people had noticed, by the proclamation, of my design to visit the town. The wall which encompasses it is 2 feet and half height, and at least 11 inches broad, so that a coach and a horse may have driven very safely around it, and it's flanked with strong towers at 10 feet distance. I stepped over the great western gate and passed very gently, and sidling to 2 principal streets only in my short waistcoat for fear of damaging the road and evens of the houses with the skirts of my coat. I walked with the utmost circumspection to avoid treading on any strangler who might remain in the street, although the orders were very strict, that all people should keep in their houses at their own peril. The garret windows and tops of houses were so crowded with spectators that I thought in all my travels I have not seen a more populous place. The city is an exact square, each side of the wall being 500 feet long. The two great streets which run across and divide it into 4 quarters are 5 feet wide. The lanes and the alleys, which I would not enter, but only view them as I passed, are from 12 to 8 inches. The town is capable of holding 500,000 souls. The houses are from 3 to 5 stores, the shops and markets well provided. The Emperor Palace is in the center of the city, where the two great streets meet. It is enclosed by a wall of 2 feet high and 20 feet distance from the buildings. I had His Majesty's permission to step over this wall, and, the space being so wide between that and the palace, I could easily view it on every side. The outer court is a square of 40 feet, and includes 2 other courts. In the inmost are the royal apartments, which I was very desirous to see, but I found it extremely difficult, for the great gates from one square into another were but 8-inch high and 7-inch wide. Now, the buildings of the outer court were at least 5 feet high, and it was impossible for me to stride over them without infinite damage to the pile. Though the walls were strongly built of hand stone and 4 inches thick, at the same time the emperor had a great desire that I should see the magnificence of his palace, but this I was not able to do till 3 days later, which I spent in cutting down with my knife some of the largest trees in the royal park, about 100 yards distant from the city. Of these trees I made 2 stools, each about 3 feet high and strong enough to bear my weight. The people having received notice a second time, I went again through the city to the palace with my 2 stools in my hand. When I came to the side of the outer court, I stood upon one stool and took the other in my hand. This I lifted over the roof and gently set it down on the space between the first and the second court, which was 8 feet wide. I then stepped over the building very conveniently from one stool to another, and drew up the first after me with a hooked stick. By this contrivance I got into the inmost court, and, laying down upon my side, I peeled my face to the windows of the middle stores, which were left open on purpose, and discovered the most splendid apartments that can be imagined. There I saw the emperor and the young princess in their several lodgings with their chief attendants about them. Her Imperial Majesty was pleased to smile very graciously upon me, and gave me out of the window her hand to kiss. But I should not anticipate the reader with further description of this kind, because I reserve them for a great work which is now almost ready for press, containing a general description of this empire from its first erection through a long series of princes, with particular account of their wars and politics, laws, learnings, and religion, their plants and animals, their peculiar manners and customs, with other matters very curious and useful. My chief design at present being only to relate such events and transactions as happened to the public or to myself during a residence of about 9 months in that empire. One morning, about a fortnight after I had obtained my liberty, Reudressel, principal secretary, as they style him for private affairs, came to my house attended by only one servant. He ordered his coach to wait at a distance and desired I would give him an hour's audience, which I readily consent to, on account of his quality and personal merits, as well as of a many good office he had done me during my solicitation at court. I offered to lay down, that he might be more conveniently reach my ears, but he chose rather to let me hold him in my hand during our conversation. He began with compliments on my liberty, said he might pretend to some merit in it, but, however, added that if he had not been for the present situation of things at court, perhaps I might not have obtained it so soon. For, he said, as flourishing a condition as well may appear to be to foreigners, we labor under two mighty evils, a violent faction at home and the danger of an invasion by a most potent enemy from abroad. As to the first, you are to understand that for about 70 moons past there have been two struggling parties in the empire, under the name of the Tramkenson and the Swankenson, from the high and low wheels of their shoes by which they distinguish themselves. It is alleged, indeed, that the high heels are most agreeable to our ancient constitution, but, however this be, His Majesty has determined to make use only of low heels in the administration of the government, and all officers in the gift of the crown, as you cannot observe, and particular that His Majesty's imperial heels are lower at least by a drawer than any of his court. Drawer is a measure about 14 part of an inch. The animosity between these two parties runs so high that they will neither eat, nor drink, nor talk with each other. We compute the Tramkenson, or high heels, to exceed us in number, but the power is wholly on our side. We apprehend His Imperial Highness, the heir to the crown, to have some tendency towards the high heels. At least, we can plainly discover that one of his heels is higher than the other, which gives him a noble in his gait. Now, in the middle of this intestine disquiet, we are threatened with an invasion from the island Blefuscu, which is the other great empire of the universe, almost as large and as powerful as this of His Majesty. For as to what we had heard you affirm, that there is another kingdom and states in the world inhabited by human creatures as large as you, our philosophers are in much doubt, and would rather conjure that you are dropped from the moon or one of the stars, because it is certain that 100 mortals of your bulk would in short time destroy all the fruits and cattle in His Majesty's domains. Besides, our histories of 6,000 moons make no mention of any other region than the two great empires of Lilliput and Blefuscu, which two mighty powers have, as I was going to tell you, been engaged in the most obstinate war for 36 moons past. It began upon the following occasion. It is allowed in all hands that the primitive ways of breaking eggs before we eat them was upon the large end, but His present Majesty's grandfather, while he was a boy, going to eat an egg and break it according to the ancient practice, happened to cut one of his fingers, whereupon the emperor his father published an edict commanding all his subjects, upon great penalties, to break the smaller end of their eggs. The people so highly resented this law that our histories tell us there have been 6 rebellions raised upon the account, wherein one emperor lost his life and another his crown. These civil commotions were constantly formed by the monarchs of Blefuscu, and when they were quelled, the exile always fled for refuge to that empire. It is computed that 11,000 persons have at several times suffered death rather than submit to break their eggs at the smaller end. Many hundreds large volumes have been published upon this controversy, but the book of the big endings have been long forbidden, and the whole party rendered incapable by law of holding employments. During this course of these troubles, the Emperor of Blefuscu did frequently expostulated by their ambassadors, accusing us of making a sham in religion by offering against a fundamental doctrine in our great prophet Lustrung, in the 54th chapter of the Blundercrow, which is their Auchron. This, however, is tied to be a mere strain upon the text, for the words are these, that all true believers break their eggs at the convenient end, and which is the convenient end seems, in my humble opinion, to be left to every man's conscience, or at least in the power of the chief magistrate to determine. Now, the big Andean exiles have found so much credit in the Emperor of Blefuscu's court, and so much private assistance and encouragement for their party have at home, that a bloody war has been carried on between the two empires for 36 moons, with various success, during which time we have lost 40 capital ships and a much greater number of smaller vessels, together with 30,000 of our best seamen and soldiers. And the damage received by the enemy is reckoned to be somewhat greater than ours. However, they have now equipped a numerous fleet and are just preparing to make descent upon us, and His Imperial Majesty, placing great confidence in your valor and strength, has commanded me to lay his account of his affairs before you. I desire the secretary to present my humble duty to the Emperor, and to let him know that it would not become me, who was a foreigner, to interfere with parties, but I was ready, with the hazard of my life, to defend his person and the state against all invaders. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, and if you like it, please leave a comment. Bye for now.